Learn from the old to know the new. That's what Confucius said about 2,500 years ago. To truly understand Obeya, we must learn from its roots. So let's revisit these roots and see what insights they can give us to take our Obeya work to a higher level. I'm Tim from the Toyota Management Institute, and let's dive deep into the roots of Obeya. Our first stop is Shōin Jinja, a Shinto shrine dedicated to Yoshida Shōin, a famous samurai who lived in the 19th century in Japan, a time when Japan was forced to open up its doors again to the West after 265 years of isolation. Yoshida Shōin was one of Japan's finest 19th century educators. He had a huge impact on the transformation of Japan into a modern state. This is Shokason Juku, which is the school where Yoshida Shōin taught his students. In that time in Japan, education was largely done in these kinds of schools, which are commonly referred to as temple schools or 𝘬𝘪𝘥𝘰. Back in the days, were especially the samurai who were teaching their students in the arts of reading, writing, mathematics, and mainly Confucian ethics. That's one of the reasons why Confucianism became so mainstream in Japan. Yoshida was also a bit of a rebel. He was imprisoned a number of times, and in the end he was even sentenced to death by decapitation when he was 29, because he tried to assassinate a senior shogun official. One noteworthy episode is that he tried to win passage to the USA on Commodore Perry's ship, while knowing that if the Japanese government caught wind of this idea, they would probably cut off his head, because at that time it was strictly forbidden for Japanese people to leave Japan. So strong was his sense of purpose to learn from the West. Purpose, or kokorozashi in Japanese, has a strong connection to the samurai, and especially Yoshida Shōin. It impacted many of his students, and in this way had a huge influence that still continues on in today's Japan. One of Yoshida's famous expressions is, "A person without a purpose is an insect." Purpose also directly connects to the Obeya methodology, as it is the starting point when creating an Obeya in the Toyota Way management style. It is the Buddha that teaches us that a strong sense of purpose will enable us to do what is necessary, even in the face of adversity. Another idea that Yoshida transmitted to his students is 𝘬𝘰𝘮𝘭𝘥, or knowledge and action are one. This concept was formulated 2,300 years ago by Mencius, a disciple of Confucius. It teaches us that knowledge without action is useless, and action without knowledge is a possibly dangerous waste of effort. The idea of 𝘬𝘰𝘮𝘭𝘥 was introduced to Japan in the 17th century, but through the teachings of samurai like Yoshida Shōin, it would have a lasting influence on Japan. A modern-day version of 𝘬𝘰𝘮𝘭𝘥 would be learn by doing, mixed with do what you say. Practicality with an ethical dimension to it. In relation to the Obeya, we could say that where kokorozashi is the part that relates to purpose, 𝘬𝘰𝘮𝘭𝘥 is about taking actions. Like the PDCA cycle, you define the actions, you put them into practice, you reflect upon them, and you adjust. Every good Obeya always follows the principle of cause and effect. Reflection upon actions is done daily, because it's what you do every day that decides what you're going to get in the end. 𝘬𝘰𝘮𝘭𝘥 was also known by the samurai of the 12th century, the warriors of ancient Japan. The Hagakure, also known as the Bible of the samurai, mentions the reflection practice of a samurai who would record daily the mistakes he made and reflect upon them in order to develop himself into a better samurai, in line with Confucian ethics. The samurai lived by a code called Bushido, which means the way of the warrior. Essential here is the last syllable, do, which means road or way, and it points to a path of improvement of skills and spirit. Japan is well known for its martial arts: kendo, judo, aikido, karate-do, kyudo, and notice how they all end in do, which is the way. But this is not limited to martial arts only. The art of tea is called sado, flower arrangement is called kado, and calligraphy is referred to as shodo. And what they all have in common is a strong focus on learning by doing. Real development can only happen when you put things into practice. Where does all this practice and learning take place? Right, the dojo, the place where the way is practiced. The concept of a room where people gather and develop themselves is starting to take shape throughout history. This idea of a dojo can also be found in many factories throughout Japan. In so-called kunren dojo, workers can train and master the skills and techniques necessary to perform the work. Often these dojo are located on the factory floor next to the production line. There, learning takes place where it matters most, the gemba. At Nissan Yokohama plant, they took the idea of a kunren dojo even a bit further and shaped the dojo into an actual obeya aimed at training and developing employees. Japan has always had a gemba-oriented approach rooted in the practicality of the craftsman and the samurai. The gemba is the place where value is created. In order to provide value, it is essential that we have a clear grasp on the conditions, or, as Jidoka teaches us, that we are able to see and know whether things are normal or whether an abnormality has occurred. And in that last case, we need to stop the process and take action. This can only be done at the actual place, looking at the actual things, or as they say in Japanese, genshi genbutsu. It literally translates as the actual place and the actual things, but it means much more than that. Taichi explained it as closely observing the gemba, analyzing the gained information, clearly grasping the problem, formulating a countermeasure, and implementation. In a factory environment, this is pretty straightforward, as you can see what is happening right in front of you. And if you make use of visual control tools like andon, a production board, etc., this gets even easier. Things get more difficult when you're in an office environment. What you see most of the time is a bunch of people and a bunch of computers, and you have no clue what's going on. But what if we would try to make the work visible based on the ideas we just covered? Right, you'd get an obeya, but not quite. We're still missing something. Green tea was brought to Japan in the 12th century by a Zen monk called Eisai. From there on, tea came to play a defining role in the culture of Japan, and it even became an art form. Arguably the most influential tea master, 𝘸𝘪𝘥𝘰, shaped the traditional tea ceremony into a form still practiced today. He introduced two concepts that would have a lasting impact: omotenashi and 𝘬𝘰𝘮𝘰𝘮. Omotenashi is often translated as the art of hospitality, but that hardly covers the richness it possesses. Tea master Kimura explained it to me as follows: a host and guests gather in a room to create an extraordinary experience together. Rather than being a linear transaction, omotenashi points to the idea of people with different roles interacting in order to share a unique moment in time and space. 𝘸𝘪𝘥𝘰 called this 𝘬𝘰𝘮𝘭𝘥, which literally means one time, one meeting, and it states that every moment is unique and should be valued accordingly. On a side note, in the tea room or chashitsu, you can also see visual tools to stimulate conversation and discussion. In the tokonoma, which is a sort of alcove in the tea room, you will find a flower arrangement that fits the theme of the occasion, and also a hanging scroll with elegantly written calligraphy is put on the wall. During the ceremony, people look at the flower arrangement and discuss its meaning. They read the calligraphy and try to figure out the wisdom behind the words. In this way, the tea ceremony is much more than just sipping tea, and the tea room is much more than just a space. In the tea room, people with different roles gather and interact to create something great together while practicing and learning the art of tea. The parallel with the obeya is not hard to follow. In the obeya, people with different roles gather and interact to create something great together while practicing and learning the art of management. I'm here at the 𝘬𝘰𝘮𝘭𝘰, which is a nice little Zen temple, and it's the ideal spot to share with you a story I was told a while ago by a Zen priest. And it also nicely illustrates why an obeya might not work when its essence is forgotten. Once there was a boy and his little brother, and both of them were thirsty as it was a hot day. And they only had one bottle of water, so somehow they needed to find a way to divide the content among the two of them. Here the priest asked what the best way would be to share the water. Well, a lot of rational people would argue that they would need to find a way to divide the water into equal parts. And right they are. Both have an equal amount of water, nobody loses, end of story. Or not. The priest, however, mentioned that in Zen there's a more virtuous way to deal with this situation. So the boy gives his younger brother the bottle and says, drink as much as you like, as long as you leave a little bit for me. And the younger brother drinks, and after a few sips he gives the bottle back to his older brother, as he knows that his brother is thirsty too. In this way the bottle goes back and forth until in the end it is finally empty. The brothers have quenched their thirst, but at the same time so much more has taken place. By sharing the water, an ongoing interaction between the two brothers was initiated. The sharing of water created multiple contact points that reinforced their relationship and mutual trust. Equally dividing the content is a typical result-oriented approach. You may get a result, but nothing more than that. The Zen way, on the other hand, shows a true understanding of what is important for us human beings. Connection, interaction, and sharing energy. Herein lies the secret magic that makes the obeya so much more than just a room with goals and targets, graphs and data on the wall. It's a place of connection and learning, steeped in centuries of tradition. As sort of a conclusion of this story, let me share with you the remarkable connection between Chinese learning, 11th century Japan, Yoshida Shoin, and Taichi Ohno and the Toyota production system. For this, we need to go back to the 6th century. At that time, Japan was called Yamato, which means big harmony. Then, in the 11th century, in the tale of Prince Genji, we encounter the word Yamato Damashi, which means the spirit of Japan. It's a word that tries to capture the essence of Japanese culture. In the tale, it is stated that it is when there's a fund of Chinese learning that the Japanese spirit is respected in the world. What is meant by that is that Japan's native virtue flourishes best not in contrast to foreign civilization, but when it is grounded on a solid base of Chinese learning. Then in the 19th century, Yoshida Shoin saw Western learning as something necessary to help flourish the Japanese spirit, and even wrote a poem about it. I knew that it would end so if I acted thus, but I'm compelled by Yamato Damashi. Then, in the 20th century, Taichi Ohno, the founder of modern Toyota production system, was inspired by this poem, and he changed it into his own version that goes like this. I know that if I improve it, it will become better, so I'm compelled by Kaizen Damashi. Kaizen Damashi means the spirit of Kaizen, and it is also referred to as the Toyota spirit. This gives us a good hint how the Kaizen spirit or the Toyota spirit is connected to the Yamato spirit, the spirit of Japan, and thus to Chinese learning. This also shows how knowledge and virtue or action go hand in hand to create true wisdom.